On your mark, get set, save. Get to Nissan's Bottom Line Summer event and take home a winner with big model year-end offers on our award-winning lineup. Hurry, offers end soon. Shop your local Nissan store and choose Nissan.com today.
Blog Talk Radio.
Those who dare to travel in the spaces between the lines. This is Shadow Travels with your hosts, Kevin Cook and Ray Cezone.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Shadow Travels. I'm just waiting on Ray to hopefully call in and join us in a little bit. We have a great show for you tonight. As I mentioned at the end of last week, we have, she has quite a resume, Mary Marshall, the Paranormal MD, a radio host, author, lecturer, TV personality, and most important to both Ray and I, as a lot of you know, educator. So we have a lot of things to talk with Mary about tonight, and we're going to get right to it. I do want to remind everybody that you can call in if you have a question or a comment for either myself, Ray, or Mary, and that number is area code 516-387-1922. You can also post questions to our Facebook page, the Shadow Travels Facebook page, or the Syracuse Area Paranormal Facebook page, and we can take your questions that way as well. So for right now, let me go ahead and bring Mary in. Hi, Mary. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It is definitely a privilege and an honor to have you on here. It is. And like I said, hopefully my co-host Ray will be joining us shortly. But you have an incredible, I guess we can call it paranormal resume, if you want to call it that. And you probably heard me. Well, over 20 plus years, if I'm not mistaken. That's
yeah. You know what? It's one of those. I think it's so funny when you hear like people introduce or talk about things. It's because although I take the work and the topic matter seriously, I don't take myself very seriously, so I always tend to just chuckle about it. So
it's definitely an extensive laundry list of things you've accomplished. Let's put it more informally, I guess.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. And I had said at the top of the show, most important to both Ray and I is the thing on your list that as an educator, and we'll certainly talk about that because both Ray and I are educators, we're teachers, as well as almost everybody else on our team, which kind of gives us a little niche and kind of makes us unique. But we definitely think that that's a hugely important aspect to this whole field, is the education field. So good place to start is always the beginning. So how did you get involved in this 20 plus years ago? What piqued your interest in it?
It was just, I think, having various experiences over time. And for a long time, due to my religious upbringing, I steered clear of it. I studied behind the scenes, so to say, and back then there wasn't a whole lot. It was very metaphysical related. And then eventually when I did get to the field, started with trying out a couple other groups, kind of like, all right, what's going on here? I personally had a different mindset or direction that I wanted to go, in that I wanted more answers that would be considered by the majority more acceptable versus, something metaphysical. So I took a very, kind of kind of like parapsychology. You've got the science, you've got the metaphysics, you got a little of everything. And so that's how I eventually struck out on my own. And then at that point, it was just a matter of, it's really funny how things go, because I didn't set out to do anything in particular. It just, one thing led to the next. I literally happened to be at the college speaking in a friend's communications class that she was teaching. And during the break, I had been thinking about starting classes. How do you approach the college on this? Because this is the world of academia. They're not, they're not too thrilled about this type of thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And,
right.
Right, and so just sort of started
absolutely.
It. And went in, and it was really funny because when I first went into the office, I was talking. I said, I'm considering doing this and trying to figure out, where do I even start? Who do I talk to about this, such an obscure thing for the colleges? And at that point, the secretary just looks at me, puts her finger up with this very peculiar look on her face and says, hold on one moment. And she comes back and she says, go right in. I ended up going right in the office, and he tells me that they had been talking about it that morning.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Right? And so then it just turned into, what is this going to look like? And so the best thing happened is it pushed me into heavier probably into the sciences than I even was at the time, in order to accommodate what the college wanted or was going to require from this.
Sure.
And
okay.
That's how it started.
Now, were you teaching were you teaching the class? Was it a regular semester class, or was it a kind of like a once a week non-credit type course, or?
Yeah, it's non-credit.
Now, do you get? I'm curious. I was just going to ask out of just a personal curiosity on this. I have to imagine when you started this, you must have been bombarded with the constant skepticism from people that would take the class just to quote unquote prove you wrong with what you had to say. Was that an issue? Was that a problem?
No, not really. Because again, I think I didn't go in there saying, this is a Ouija board and this is how you use it, or I present things, very left and right side brain. So a lot of things were coming from a very technical and or scientific perspective and tying it in as best you could as it related to the paranormal. That has evolved greatly over the years of what I've been able to discover by connecting these dots, so to say. With that being said, I then turn around and say, and now for something that makes completely no sense, but again, part of what you do in the field is you document and you write. You're keeping track of people's experiences, what they've done, what's worked, what's happened. And if somebody can, sage, well, I'm going to take sage for an example, like a cleansing or using sage. It makes no logical sense. Yet this is something that, since the beginning of written history has been used. And we have seen it work. It doesn't make sense that it should work.
Right, exactly. Right. Which drives the scientist part of you crazy.
Absolutely.
You're right.
It does.
You're right. Yeah, I can imagine, and that was my next. Go ahead.
Yeah, I always say you should see the arguments that go on inside my head, because the analytical side is just not appeased with some of this, and got to go back and forth. And you know what, though? It's really good because it's pushed me and driven me forward, and hopefully made the information that I've been able to gather that much better for everyone else.
Sure, absolutely. Like I said, you are really the first. I don't know if I should say this. A couple weeks ago, we had a guest on by the name of Jason Quitt. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jason. He's written a couple of books. He is, according to him, he's an interdimensional time traveler. He's learned how to do those things. So he really relates a lot of it to physics, which I'm not even going to pretend to understand because I don't. But that was kind of his take on maybe metaphysics or metaphysical things. But he's probably the closest we've had on here that would come to a science aspect of it. And you really bring the full science aspect, I think, to these investigations. And I know that the Paranormal MD is not just your title; it's also your team, correct? I want to make sure that.
Right. It's everything. It's my radio show. It's the it's just that it just keeps the name, the Paranormal MD, investigative research that's for that part, and then I've got the radio show, and so it's just the paranormal MD across the board.
Now, on your team, there's 2 others on your team as well, or is it?
Not any longer.
Okay.
Initially, I started out with, like everyone else, you have different size groups, and you know what? To be honest, as certain things happen, and it kind of would dwindle down, and then you might add to it again. The only person I work with now is Pam Herman. Her and I have been partners in investigating for, 5 years or something like that now. She's absolutely awesome. And one thing we had discovered is we went to do a home investigation, which is not something I do a whole lot of anymore, but at the time. And we set up just the 2 of us in less time than it took when we had 5 more people on the team. And that's when you go, what's wrong with this picture,
Right.
So you cut down on the drama and all the different personalities and just go with what works now.
Much more efficient, and like you said, saves on a lot of time. And we have... Go ahead.
But I was just going to say, because also, she knows me so well, she kind of just goes with the flow. And so that's awesome, because I do tend to go between the team and the individual, between the education and the radio, I'm all over the place, so it works out well.
Now, I'm still hoping that he calls in, but if my teammate Ray and my co-host Ray joins us, I kind of hope he does, because he's our team empath, or somewhat of a psychic, but he certainly considers himself more of an empath. I'm sure you've worked with them on various teams you've been on, or with your early team members. How do you correlate, say, somebody's psychic abilities to science? How do you make that connection? Is there a connection, I guess? And if there is, how do you make that connection?
Well, here to make it even a little more peculiar, I actually I am a sensitive myself. And I didn't talk about it for many years until probably the last couple. It's, little by little it's coming out.
Sure.
And so that in itself were some of my earliest experiences in life, were the, kind of psychic medium type experiences. And again, that's that argument inside my head. It's happening. I'm getting information validated in that it wasn't just something I'd made up in my head, and I'm going like, what? And questioning it. So that sent me searching for correlations on certain things. And if for instance would be, I used to hear psychic mediums all the time talk about crystals. And, crystals, they wear their crystals because it grounds me. And it would drive me crazy. I'm like, well, what does that mean, grounds me?
Right.
I'm looking for, So if you really start looking again at the history of crystals and the electromagnetic capabilities of quartz, and going into, think of, and this is how I kind of relay it, think of before we had synthetics, you would have quartz watches. They would actually have quartz in there, the crystals, and the reason for that is because quartz works as a stabilizer of frequencies. It also helps to resonate the frequencies, and it amplifies. Human beings have what some might refer to as an aura, but is a real thing. It's our bioelectric field. So if you have your own bioelectric field, it would make sense that a crystal would work in the same way we would use it in any other means, to stabilize, to resonate, and amplify. And that would be thus then what they're referring to with it grounds me.
So it all really comes down to the idea of energy.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Everything is about that. I've been working on for a year. I have Jay Bachochin of WPI Hunts the Truth,
Yep.
and I have been working on a documentary. And it's on a case study of the Wisconsin Sasquatch and other phenomena. And what drew me and kept me going out there in the first place, who I knew Jay was, he was a friend and in the field, was the first time out experiencing the most phenomenal, bizarre light anomalies I have ever seen that went on for 30 minutes, and we eventually now call this the Wall of Light.
And this was right in the woods, right in the Wisconsin woods?
This is in the Kettle Moraine. Kettle Moraine is about like 55,000 acres. Obviously, we're in certain areas of it.
Sure.
Deep in the woods, it was anywhere from, let's say, and I say this because it could have been, give or take a foot here or there, but 4 to 10 feet in diameter, irregularly shaped, diffused white light, anywhere from 2 feet off the ground to the treetop. And it would be like a flash pulse and there was no particular pattern to it. And so the first thing, I'm deep in the woods. I know it's not headlights. It'd have to be something really obvious. This went on, and finally after 30 minutes, we just walked out of that. And probably 50 yards from that, I had a phantom experience there. In that, which, I found myself doing the quick stop, pivot, turn around, and back up because I was convinced it was a large animal coming up on us, thinking it's a wolf or something. This particular night, it happened to be a super blood moon, so it was very bright. You could basically read if you wanted to. So when I turned around, as I'm turning around, Jay hears, as he would describe, a huff. And nothing was there. This is what kept me going out.
Right.
And
that's...
So since then, though, what happened is I became, every time you work on something, and this is why I like crossing over fields, I have to admit, I used to have a paranormal prejudice like many do. You can ask people, I'll ask people at camp, when I'm speaking, who believes in ghosts, who believes in, UFOs, who believes in, and all the hands raised. You say, who believes in Bigfoot, and like 2 people way in the back.
Yeah, right.
Raise their hand because they don't. Because even if they do, they don't want to admit it because of the stigma attached to it. So
that's very interesting that you bring that up, and I just real quick, I want to interject this whole idea of belief versus non-belief, and it goes much deeper than that. But a few weeks ago, we had on Chris DeCesare. I'm not sure if you know Chris. Chris had a very, very, so you know the story, had a very intense paranormal experience while in college back in the mid-'80s. And we had a great discussion with him about how he was not somebody that grew up reading books about this or watching TV shows about it. He wasn't a believer, but he wasn't a non-believer. He just didn't really think about it. And his parents were by no means believers. And it's interesting how quick I think people's perceptions change in that regards. Ray and I often joke, and some of the other people on the team who are teachers often joke as well about how, obviously people, we teach at public high schools in right around central New York, and how people know what we do, the other teachers know what we do, and they kind of get a chuckle out of it until you're alone with them in the hall or somewhere else, and then they say, hey, come over here for a second, I got to tell you something, and then it seems like everybody has their own experience, but nobody wants to come forward and admit that they're even somewhat of a believer. So it got me thinking to our discussion with Chris, and then, the circumstances we run into. I very much agree with that.
And you know what? It's the experiential. Early on, you can ask students in a class and say, if I handed you a stack of scientific papers that prove that ghosts exist, would this make you believe? Most people will respond with I think I'd have to see it for myself.
Right.
And so it's always about their own personal experience. one of the things, though, that I then teach, the irony of that is neurologically how faulty we are as human beings, our brains are. And that your brain will outright lie to you and fill in information and so on and so forth. And this is why we use things, equipment or even video or audio outside of ourselves, because you can't 100% trust your own experience.
Right. You need that extra validation.
Right. But yeah, people until they experience it, if they're non-believers, generally, you could say anything. I've the same time in a class, atheist, Catholic, someone who would describe themselves closest to belief in Buddhism, and all these. So anyway, all these different belief systems, religions, and cultures. And so it's really interesting, though, when these people are kind of more like-minded in the sense they're there for a reason, to learn or to understand, and how the similarities then start coming out as far as what their beliefs and so forth are, particularly with ghosts. If you look at ghosts, like in history, there's two things throughout history that are common: music and ghosts. And I find that very interesting.
It is very interesting, yes, without a doubt. You've spoken about equipment. I was going to ask you, I had a couple of questions about your take on maybe certain pieces of equipment that are commonly used, and to see, I know that the equipment is very debatable within the field. Some people swear by one thing, some people swear by another. But as far as investigations that you've been on, I'm assuming you've come into contact with most of the common pieces of equipment that are out there. What's your take on something? Well, let's start as simple as a digital recorder and EVPs. Are you I guess I'll use the word believer, but I'm not sure that's the right word. Are you a believer in EVPs? Are you a believer in the use of a digital recorder to collect that type of evidence?
Absolutely. Because you get, by now, you have like, thousands or whatever. I don't even know, more. I'm sure probably more than that. EVP. And sometimes it's random, residual. More times than not, it's a very intelligent interaction in that they may be answering you directly to a question that you've asked, or they're commenting on what you're talking about with another or what you're doing.
Right.
And for instance, could be as simple as I was talking, because as soon as, even during our setup, I have audio running for this reason, because of early on having this happen, and talking about, I want to run an experiment or a test up in that room, and you hear a voice say test room that wasn't there at the time. Or on a case where I had this couple whose home, and I was really, really hoping, because the woman was super, super freaked out, that I wasn't going to find anything, and got one of my best EVPs ever, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course.
For her. But it was, I wanted them home in their room, as they always do, go to bed. So it's like now 1:30 in the morning. I'm thinking the door's shut. There's cameras and audio in there, but, they could have really fallen asleep. So as I get down, their master bedroom is on the lower level, and I kind of call out their names, and then you hear a male voice, and there's no male in the house. It was just this Pam, and and a male voice say, maybe they're sleeping. And then, which is really interesting, you then hear me say, they might be sleeping. I repeated what the voice said.
Right, exactly.
I'm really huge, though, about validation. And I think a lot of pieces of equipment that are used, like Spirit Box, which is basically a broken radio for all intents and purposes, it's scanning. is people tend to not think about chance and probability. And what I mean by that is how many words could come out of a radio? How many shows are and different things that are playing that are on air, signals demodulating, whatever the reason is, that could be applicable to what a person in the house, a situation, someone else in the room. So I like to make sure I'm all over anything that promotes communication. Just make sure you're really communicating first.
Sure.
Ask questions that no one can, the answers to, and that no one from the outside would know. What color shirt am I wearing? Simple as that. Get three answers in a row.
It's so funny that you bring this up. My Spirit Box is going to be my next piece of equipment that I asked you about, and it's one of ours that we tend to have the best luck with, and we tend to have the best luck with it because of exactly what you just said. We have gotten, and I have to relate this story because it's just, to me, it's an amazing Spirit Box story and illustrates exactly the example you just gave. About 6 months ago, we were doing an investigation at a local place in Syracuse called the Barnes-Hiscock Mansion, which is kind of our go-to place to go to. And we were in the basement. It was absolutely pitch black. There's a glow from a K2 meter, and that was it, and a little tiny red light on the Spirit Box. And one of the people with us, unbeknownst to anybody in the group at all, was wearing one of those little rubber, fundraiser-type bracelets. And it was a yellow bracelet with blue lettering. And he asked out loud, as the Spirit Box is going, what color is the bracelet I'm wearing? And right from the Spirit Box came the word blue. And he said, well, the lettering is blue, but what color is the bracelet? And as soon as he said that, yellow. And there must have been 15 people with us, and everybody heard it.
Nice.
And it was incredible. And I turned to look at him and find him in the dark, and I said, are you even wearing a bracelet? And no one had any idea. He had it on long sleeves, and it was tucked up underneath the sleeves. And so no one had even seen it. So we had no idea. And it was clear as can be. So that's just, that's a great example of what you just said. It was an intelligent response to two direct questions, actually, one right after another.
Yeah, and that's nice. That's nice. And now you feel like you can take whatever responses come out of there more seriously now.
Right, exactly. That's very true.
Because if you just said, if you start out with questioning, well, what's your name? Well, any name can come out of it. If you say, all of a sudden a word just comes out and it says, smoke. Right. And they're like, oh, my gosh, he was a smoker. Or, oh, my gosh, that person died of, and so on and so forth. How many ways can that apply?
Exactly. That's very true. We always do our best to make sure that we ask those very pointed, very specific answer questions when we use that. And aside from that, what about anything with photography or video? I know there's a lot of people out there that will debate a lot of things, and we could spend hours doing a whole orb discussion back and forth. But, what about things like the infrared cameras or the full spectrum cameras? Are, in your opinion, beneficial, useful, get the results that are intended, or too many false positives?
If you're going to, you really have to use infrared or full spec. And what's nice about it is that, the other, cameras are just staying within the visible light. This allows you to see a little bit further into each of those ranges. At the same time, taking most of the focus out of the visible light range. And that allows you to see a little bit deeper into the ultraviolet and infrared. That there has been greater success since, if we could get even further into the UV range, that would be great. And it just has to do, I think, sort of with the short wave, long wave, and the frequency on it. So, yeah, I think you have to use, full spec or infrared. Right. And the thing is, again, though, is people really kind of need to pay attention to things. If you have so many times you have people who will look at things and they're orbs. Well, digital photography, there's been a tenfold increase of orbs, so to say, captured in photos since digital. Mm-hmm. And so that tells you something right in itself. If you were to, and we know all the obvious, water, moisture, this, that, lens flare, insects, don't realize, well, I took a photo outside and I didn't see anything. Well, I think it's something like 70% moisture as far as what we need, as far as breathing in. It's there.
Right.
You flash, you're going to capture droplets.
Absolutely. Yep.
And people don't realize that.
I know that the criteria we always try to put on ourselves for orbs is a couple things. It has to be very solid looking. It has to show movement in a regular in a regular picture. Almost has to have what they call tail, for lack of a better word. And also one thing that I think that we kind of put on it, which helps, is if we can also correlate it to two other things that happened at the same time. If I take a picture of you and the psychic says there's someone standing behind you and we get an EVP at the same time, for example. So we always try to correlate it to at least two other things at the exact same moment. Then we kind of move it a little bit closer to the, spirit side of things, in our mind anyway. But certainly, and I'm in agreement, most of what is out there right now is simply one of some kind of physical material, dust or something like that.
Right. I like video because, like you said, it can show movement. You're able to see, is it self-illuminating? That's another nice one to add into the criteria. Versus, is it a reflection off the IR? And for instance, you're going to have a certain area that the center that's going to be flooded more with light. Some of the newer cameras, not as much, but some of the older ones. And so, for instance, would be, and I was just gotten done kind of telling my class to get over the orb, not in that way, but,
Right, yeah.
And I come back in the next week and said, well, a funny thing happened, and I had a video to show them. And it was a very tiny orb, and here's where it gets interesting. As it came to the center and moved away from the camera, it got a groove that's backwards. It should become larger as it gets closer. So it got larger as it went away. Second to that is that it got brighter outside of the more flooded center area of the infrared light. So, and it was oddly not only self-illuminating, it cast a second glow was a bedroom situation onto the bed. So it was very interesting. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I've ever seen one like that. I've never seen one cast a second glow. That's pretty impressive, for sure. Go ahead.
If I may, I will say something that will tell something, though, that and a lot of people don't like this because people want to believe what they want to believe. But what started something for me, again, when I was over the year of working out at the Kettle, and because of the light anomalies I saw, which were just huge and went on, for forever and size, I really, really started researching into this. I will tell you, for a lot of your outdoor light anomalies, the smaller ones that sometimes are just, and it's interesting because even my Kettle Case partner, Into the Woods partner, Jay, will
He's on next week, by the way. He will next week, I'm sure.
Yeah, and he'll tell you I'm being Scully because I have an answer for everything, analytical, logical, scientific answer. But it's decaying organic matter can produce methane gas. And methane, under certain lighting conditions, even from like no clouds or half moon to full moon, can fluoresce. And it can produce a green, blue, or red light. And it can be furthermore be set off by insects nipping at it. And so a lot of I'm not going to say all, but I think the significant amount of those types of lights that people witness outdoors in particular, that has to do with decaying organic matter, and it's a sense of like chemoluminescence or bioluminescence. Furthermore, science is really just trying to study, because it's so random, it's very hard for them to do it, but they've recognized not that long ago something called ball lightning, which is that, the plasma gases, the incandescence and luminescence type thing. And depending upon the geological makeup of the ground around, you can, again, is it high in silica, sand, or quartz, that type of thing, so you're getting a little electrical discharges, again, mixed with methane gases and nitrogen in the air and so on and so forth.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure what I experienced was, in fact, ball lightning. Part of me doesn't want to buy it because, again, when you experience it, you're like, no, but I think, that's it. And then there's earthquake lights and thunder lightning and so on and so forth. And all these things by the way, ball lightning does not just occur outdoors. There have been cases of it occurring indoors. And oddly, 20-plus years ago, I experienced it, and really not until the last few years did I feel certain, and really until this last year did I feel certain of, that was ball lightning that we experienced.
Wow. I never knew that. I knew about it outside. I never knew it could happen inside. It's yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting. I wanted to just touch on, I know that looking on your webpage, and your group identifies several different types of hauntings. And a lot of them people are familiar with, I think, and a lot of them people, I know you don't do many residential cases anymore, but I'm sure you remember from when you did, everybody thinks they have a demon. Everybody. If anything happens, it's demonic. And we always try to tell people that's got to be less than 1%, of what's actually out there. One of the things that the word ghost or the word entity or the word spirit, when we had Jason quit on the multidimensional time traveler, we brought in the idea of what a ghost is. And in his mind, and I thought this was a very interesting explanation, and I'm kind of curious to see what you think about it, that there really isn't a such thing as a ghost. It's actually somebody, it's a person who is, see if I can get this explanation right, basically occupying a different dimension who has stepped into yours briefly. And you could be doing in a sense. Okay, that's what I was going to kind of. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. That's really. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say it was a very. It was a simple explanation, and yet at the same time, it was such a complex explanation. I had never thought of it before, but it makes so much sense. So I'm just curious to hear your take on it.
I think that is it, because a lot of why I like going into the different fields is what is it in common, and what is the root cause of how this is happening. And the one thing common across the board, whether it's UFOs or ghosts or Bigfoot, is now you see it, now you don't. And so you start looking at, and so some things initially would be multiple dimensions, time. A little known thing that's starting to get more known by the general public is at the Tel Aviv University in Israel, somebody wanted to look this up, they could start there. And there's been other places too. They've conducted experiments, and they have discovered that not only the past makes up the present, but the past and the future make up the present. Now, this
that's exactly No, this is exactly his theory. This is exactly what he was talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so you have, and they've done this, and that also strikes in the idea of superposition, in which that there's a wave-particle duality, and it exists in every state. And until it is observed, or measured, in a sense, observed, is that at that point an outcome is forced and fixed. So they did experiments in which they had photons, and they were looking at them, and they were doing measurements, at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
They had those measurements, and not until they completed it, and we'll just go from 1 to 3. So after 1, and they had the measurements at 2, then they got the measurements at 3. When they completed the 3, they went back and noticed that the other 2 had changed. That 2 had changed.
Wow.
And so, therefore, the future impacted the present. It impacted the past. You know what I mean? In that sense,
yes,
of what had happened. So, when you're dealing with that kind of thing, and then I was looking into, because we all tend to go to the whole wormhole thing, and there are possibilities with that, but it really wasn't answering what I was looking for. And again, in this last year, some of the things that I started to look at, which had to do, a kind of theory that I'm going with right now, is that there is something that, if you remind you now, keep in mind what we just talked about the past and the future making the present, and superposition as far as, dual wave-particle duality.
Right.
And your observation of it forcing an outcome. And I think, Einstein had basically talked about this in 1935. But anyway,
right.
There's another thing, and that places like Cornell University are doing, the physicists there are doing experiments having to do with gravitational lensing. And what this is that they have created basically the temporal equivalent of an invisibility cloak, but it's a hole in time. And this time cloaking is possible because of that duality between space and time in electromagnetic theory. And so what they kind of do with this lensing is to, I guess the best way to kind of describe it would be, one is, they set up, in a sense, these, I want to say 2 mirrors in a sense. And we already know that they can do illusion cloaks and things like that.
Right.
But they do it through like diffraction and dispersion. They're magnifying and compressing. And although it's only for like something like 120th of a nanosecond or something ridiculously tiny like that now, they've been able to, what's in between those 2 lenses has disappeared. But if you're the observer on the outside looking at that second lens, you're going to look like nothing ever happened. But in the meantime, something has happened. There's just a hole in time, but it won't be visible, noticeable to the observer. So where I'm going with this is that although at Cornell, let's say for right now, it only lasts for 120 nanoseconds, what will our capabilities be in 300 years or a millennium from now? And what will that mean for us in the here and now? Meaning, I'm tending to start to believe that a lot of what we are experiencing, the phenomena, we're causing it. We're the ones who are causing it from various, experiments and various means. And there could be a ripple effect occurring, so some of it is a randomness, if you will.
Sure, right. It's so interesting because the whole reason that we had Jason on the show a few weeks ago is because our topic was time travel, and specifically we were going to discuss the Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk Project. which I'm sure you're familiar with. And
Right.
and both of these, and I asked Jason flat out, could these things have happened? And he said, oh, absolutely, they could have happened. Absolutely, they did happen. And, the Philadelphia experiment's largely regarded as, almost urban legend, But he said, and this goes right along with what you were just saying, that this capability is there. And not to confuse too many people listening, but we may have had this capability decades ago, already on a much larger scale.
And so things like whether it's ghosts, if you're dealing with something that's residual, that certainly can be I hate to say it this way, but it's just the easiest way for people to understand a tear in the fabric of time, so to say.
Right.
There's an entire world and going on just like we're talking right now, but we might only be privy to seeing, September 3rd at 3:33 p.m. 1933. It's going to play out like a loop. Now that could be residual. Now when you're talking about intelligent interaction, whether it be with somebody who's deceased from this world, well, where does that energy go? It's another dimension. Or you're talking about a copy universe, another dimension, or a completely different universe, another dimension. So you've got two different things kind of going on between time and space here. And it very well would not be outside of the realm of possibilities to think that Bigfoot or aliens potentially could be us. Again, just be us. In that that this is Cro-Magnon, he's, meandering through the woods, ready to, hunt and go kill something, and bam, for 20 seconds he's in our dimension. And probably just as freaked out as we are, which might explain why he was brought.
Right, exactly. I'm so fascinated by, in our psychic radio says there's no such thing as coincidences, but the people that we've had on this correlation of all these things together, it's all these stories, it's making so much sense, whether it be where the ghosts come from or now this idea of where quote-unquote Bigfoot comes from, the different levels of time, the different multi-dimensions. It's such a, I hate this very unscientific word, but very cool thing to think about. It really is.
Yeah, it is cool. It can blow your mind, really, when you think about, and then because you think about with the aliens, if we were to continue, now they've done, again, with the energy, have done experiments on how people, in a sense, are reading it, and that can apply to your psychic mediums, too. And simple experiments of, is a person looking at me or they're not looking at me? And there's been over, something like 77% accuracy on this. And it doesn't have a typical explanation for it. But when you start looking at those types of things, and where I'm going with that is that the more we start looking into our own consciousness and how we are affecting our world and the reality around us, and we're using our brains, it would make sense that, 5,000 years from now, our bodies would become, we would need the muscles, we would need our bodies to be how they are now through evolution, or more than 5,000, whatever, and communicating telepathically, kind of like the Greys, that people describe. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that this is not a completely different species, but this is in fact us in a different period of time from now.
That's bad, like you said. Wrapping your mind around that when you hear it is I'm trying to process it. It makes so much sense, and at the same time you're like, well, I cannot believe I never thought about something like that. But again, we're not trained to think like that, and that's one of the fun things that I think about this quote-unquote job, is you get to be able to think like that, and you get to be able to look at those things from those angles.
It is. It's like, because it's almost like at first ideas or notions that are just, maybe seem fanciful or fantasy. And then as you start breaking it apart and start really searching what we do already know in science, and then you go, that's not as far out there as I originally thought.
Exactly.
You think about things like CERN, the Hadron Collider in CERN. They spend billions and billions and still are spending dollars. And the main purpose of this was to discover multiple other dimensions.
Right.
And, now the byproduct, they've discovered other things, and of course there's always multiple experiments and other things going on, but that was really one of the main purposes. And so, again, when you have this going on, they're trying to create tiny black holes. You've got Fermilab in the Midwest here, places, under suspicion like HARP and so on. What are all of these doing to our electromagnetic fields in its simplest terms? And how is this affecting, again, all the phenomena, including the fact of, like we were talking about, the lights out in the woods? If you talk to a lot of the Bigfoot type, the people in that field, they will tell you that within the last year in particular, but the last 2 years, but the last year in particular, there's been a significant increase. So many people are seeing these light anomalies. Why has there been an increase?
Right.
Something is causing this increase. And maybe those circumstances just set things up just so to create, and I don't like using this word, but it fits nicely, maybe creating just a portal of some kind, the right circumstances.
Exactly. Sure. Yep, absolutely. It's we have about 10 minutes left, and I was gonna just throw out some kind of fun questions to you to lighten it up a little bit here before we wrap up. Just some less heavy stuff than we have been talking about. But in your opinion, give me what you would consider to be the most overblown paranormal event in the last, say, 50 years. What would you think? What do you think? I told you they're just fun ones to end on.
Sightings of Elvis. I don't know. That's a really tough one.
I know that.
Yeah, I still might have to go with the Elvis thing. I don't know.
With Elvis, I think I'm going to go with Amityville. With the Amityville Horror House, and just for the simple fact that I have no doubt that things happen in the house, but I think that it has become more of a commercial tourist attraction than maybe what really happened there.
Absolutely.
I guess that would be mine. How about one famous paranormal event? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, actually, when it had to do with the Amityville, I've had, you might consider trying to get him on the show, Chris Quarantino. He is one of the children that lived in that house.
Oh.
He's one of the brothers.
Okay.
And he will tell you right out, very creepy stuff happened. Very bad, very negative. There's a lot of things that have not been addressed. And more than anything, it has just taken on a life of its own and, become more lore than truth.
Right. Most definitely. I'll definitely look into him without a doubt. Let's flip it around here at the other side of the coin. What's a famous paranormal event, in the last 50 years or so that still really intrigues you? What's something that really piques your interest no matter how many times you look into it? Is there any particular event that happened?
It's an event that has not been repeated by anyone because I think it's a very arduous type of long-term experiment. The Philip experiment. And the Philip experiment was originally done, I think it was in 1972, about there. and a group of people got together, and again, speaks to what goes on in our own heads and how much are we responsible. And they decided to create a ghost. And what they did is they got together and they collectively came up with an entire history for Philip. Philip likes, kosher dill pickles, but he doesn't like butter pickles. I mean, down to specific. And they did this for like a year. It was almost a year of them continually trying to get responses by concentrating until one day they asked Philip a question, and he knocked on the table and responded. And now they made Philip up.
Right.
And so what was interesting is that Philip would respond to questions that they'd ask unless it was a question that they hadn't collectively decided an answer for. Mm-hmm. So it really goes to speak, again, to the power of our mind and how much we are responsible for things around us, too. So I would love to see something like that in an experiment we created.
Wow, I've never heard that. Now I got something to look into after the show, definitely. That's fascinating.
I was going to tell you, if you go to theparanormalmd.com, in one of the series things or something like that, you can read about it there. So
okay, great. Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Other than that, it's like it's something that there's so many. I'm very terrible at picking out like one thing.
There are definitely a lot, without a doubt. And like I said, I already brought mine up because I have my side interest in is really in the whole time travel thing. So I'm so glad that you brought that up tonight. Those are the things that really fascinate me, without a doubt. But last question for you tonight before we have to sign off. And I guess this isn't really as much of a fun question, but I think it's an important one. What do you think the most challenging aspect of being in this field is?
I think the most challenging part is that we need to collectively as a group get to a place, let's say we're like MUFON is in our organization, because if we want to be taken seriously by the scientific community, we have to go that direction. And that means separate, not tell people to stop ghost hunting, but separate investigators who are, really, CSI trained, so to say, to, to those who are doing it more as a hobby, pay and play type places.
Right, sure. Couldn't agree with you more on that.
Yeah, because if you do that, if we can do that and get that attention, then money follows. And if money follows, whether it be from private funding or government funding, then answers come. And our game, looked into by people a whole lot smarter than most of us in the field. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to myself or anybody else, but,
No, I agree with you on that. Absolutely. We have about a minute, so I always like to give people a chance to do a little self-promoting. If you want to tell people your website, about the documentary that's out, about your books that are coming out, go right ahead and do a little plug.
All right. The Into the Woods, a case study of the Wisconsin Sasquatch and other phenomena, we hope will be released in September of this year. It will be available at theparanormalmd.com and WPI Hunts the Truth and elsewhere once we figure that out. And I will be speaking at the Chicago Ghost Conference, the Milwaukee Paranormal Conference in October, and at Ashmore Estates in September. And, the rest of it, just, go there to the Paranormal MD radio, and you can get info.
Fantastic. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on tonight. I'm sorry Ray wasn't able to join us, but I thought, we hit on some great points tonight, and I loved hearing your views on the time travel stuff and as well as the scientific aspect of things. So, we'd love to have you on again sometime in the future if you're interested.
I'm always interested. You were great. Thank you for a good question.
Oh, not a problem. My pleasure. And we're looking forward to talking to Jay next week, so we'll get the whole other side. We'll get the Fox side of the story, right? Not the Scully side.
Yeah, exactly. He'll have all the good stories.
Well, thank you again, Mary, and have a wonderful night. It's great talking to you.
You too. Thanks. Good night.
Good night. All right, everybody. Great interview tonight, and Mary's a wonderful person, and please visit her webpage, visit our webpage, visit our YouTube page, check out past episodes of Shadow Travels, and we will be back here next week with, you heard Mary mention her colleague Jay, who she did Into the Woods with. He's going to be on with us next week, and we'll get the whole other side of the story, as she said. So with that, I'll sign off, and have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
Fashion Emergency Hotline.
Help. I've got a hot date tonight, and I need to look amazing.
Just go to Old Navy.
Old Navy?
Yep, Old Navy's new Rockstar jeans have built-in sculpt to make your bod look va-va-voom.
Tell me more.
Right now, all jeans are on sale up to 50% off, including kids' jeans and new men's jeans with built-in flags.
50% off?
That's right. I think you and your jeans will be very happy together.
Jeans that sculpt at an incredible price? I think I'm in love. Thanks.
Don't thank me. Thank Old Navy. Valid 8/11 to 8/24. Select styles only.
I figured out who the neighbor around the corner is.
Oh, yeah?
I like him a lot.
Ooh.
He lets me talk as much as I want, is very simple, and has great plans.
Okay, I have to meet him.
Sure. Say hi. This is Metro PCS.
Metro PCS is in your neighborhood. Come say hi and get unlimited data, talk, and text for only $30 period. All on the fast nationwide 4G LTE T-Mobile network. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figure it out. Coverage not available in some areas. 1 gigabyte of high-speed data included. See store for details, terms, and conditions, and data management info.